Alright, so let's talk about the patch notes that are dropping on Thursday, because Monday was a holiday, so the patch isn't coming out Wednesday, but Thursday, which means the patch notes, the official patch notes, are not out today when I normally would record this video, but coming out tomorrow. But I still want to do this video today, have it out of my way, because I'm going to be playing after this, and I'm already here, and all my setups here, and I'd rather not do this again tomorrow. So let's get down and dirty. 10.11 will be the last patch until the big mid-set patch in 10.12. I think what I'll do is I was debating whether I wanted to split this in two, whether next week I wanted to talk about the set up till now, and then the following week talk about what's coming in the mid-set patch. But I think I'm just going to combine them and do one giant thing in 2 weeks when the mid-set patch drops. So let's get into 10.11. First thing, we got a new galaxy called the Little Legends Galaxy. Little Legends Galaxy, where the little legends are faster and they are smaller. So you start off with 15 less health. What this probably logically means is that if you were in 7th or 8th, you're going to be in 7th or 8th a lot sooner than you were before. You're going to have to... This is going to cause some people to have to make some moves before they get to level 7, or make some moves at level 7, rather than saving up all their gold to get to level 8 and then rolling down and praying that they find a comp that they can stabilize as. You're probably just dead. Otherwise, it actually probably doesn't have that much of an impact. I don't even think games are going to be that much shorter. It's not like the Giant Legends where 25 health basically meant 2 additional rounds to have to fight through to kill somebody. I don't think this is really going to do that much outside of making it so that if you're in 7th or 8th in a lobby, you finish 7th or 8th in that lobby. Trait changes. Chrono... I believe this. Chrono 4 and Chrono 6 are getting a buff. So Chrono has always kind of been in a weird space in this patch. It's not really a build you can go linear on. So ramping up to 6 is often not very effective. There are even very few builds where you can get up to 4. It's basically Chrono Kale, and that's it. I don't think I've ever had any success playing Chrono 4 beyond Chrono Kale, because I just don't think there's anything you can really work at. I might have done Chrono 4 and Brawler Blasters. I might have been able to do that once. No, probably not. Nope. Oh, actually, yeah, I did, because I ran 2 blasters in that build. So yes, I have been able to go... Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I definitely had 4 Chrono in that once. But outside that, it's very rare to get Chrono 4 going. So they slightly have buffed Chrono 4. Really, all this does... this one's probably not overly significant. It's meaningful, but not overly meaningful. The Chrono 6 buff is actually... This is actually a huge buff. I don't think it means anything, because you cannot get any other synergies at Chrono 6. It's basically impossible to get synergies at Chrono 6 that make sense outside of Chrono. So I don't think this is meaningful. You may, in some universe, be able to get Chrono 6 Blade Master 3, which might be a build. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't think this will change the meta too much outside making Chrono Kale just a tiny bit better. As depressing as that is to probably some people. Probably for the bigger trait change is this Infiltrators change. So now when an Infiltrator jumps, it'll instantly jump at the start of combat rather than with a small delay. So here's the thing with Infiltrators. Logically, if you played set 2, Infiltrators is like Assassins. It jumps to the other side of the battlefield and whacks away at whatever was on the other side of the battlefield. But that's not how Infiltrators actually works. Infiltrators jumps to the opposite side of the battlefield, whereas Assassins jump to the opposite target. So Assassins would jump over, beat on something, and get beat on back. Infiltrators just kind of jumped to a random position. I shouldn't say random, to a position on the battlefield. They didn't instantly attack anything. They had to walk up and hit something. So what did this mean? So one thing you could do with assassins, and people did a lot with assassins, was they started putting tanky dudes in the corners. By putting a tanky dude in the corner, the assassin would jump to that tanky dude in the corner and start wailing on a tanky dude that it couldn't kill. Infiltrators, on the other hand, if you tried that same approach, where if you backlined your tanky dudes, the infiltrator would jump, and your tanky dude would ignore them and run to the front line to beat up whatever was on the front line, and the infiltrator still beat up on whatever squishy target you had in your back line. Really unfortunate. And this was probably, I'm going to be honest with you, I think this is what made Mech Infiltrator so unbearable. Because the mech would eat all the aggro on everything. Even though you had infiltrators jumping to the backline. So even if you tried to get things to not aggro to the mech and tried to aggro to the infiltrators, that wouldn't work. Because they just aggro to the mech anyway. And the infiltrators would still be beating up on your squishy ranged champions. So now, if you have your beefy tank dude in the backline and an infiltrator jumps on top of them, they're going to start beating down on each other. Big nerf to Mech Infiltrator. This is a significant nerf to Mech Infiltrator to the point that I almost wish they would buff Mech back up. I think this is going to really hurt Mech Infiltrator. It's really going to hurt Infiltrators, period. I think they're going to think back on this one and realize that they should have done this at the start of the set rather than at the end of this set. Or mid-end, whatever we're going to call it. Because this is something that probably should have functionally been in the early part of this set, so we could get used to it. Because I think this will change. While it's kind of been a meme that each nerf to mech is going to nerf Mech Infiltrator, this is probably the actual one that will kill Mech Infiltrator. That's enough of that. We'll move on to some of the champion changes. So one of the common themes was that the 3-star champions were a little over the top at times. A lot of the Shredder hyper roll was a little better than I think a lot of us were comfortable with. It's a pretty brain dead build, to be honest with you. You get a Last Whisper in the early game and you just roll down and hope that like 4 people aren't rolling down at the same time. So we're getting a bunch of nerfs to particularly to Mech Infiltrator, or not Mech Infiltrator, Shredder, and kind of some side nerfs to Poppy, to the Candyland build, I guess. So to start with Caitlyn, Caitlyn's 3-star is getting a significant nerf to her damage. So the issue with these numbers is that this could basically kill things that had a Dragon's Claw. So if you had something that had like 50% magic resistance, this would still kill it because it was so much damage. This, you now survive that hit. I think this is good change. Graves, so for people who don't really realize this, the 2 best openers that you can play with defensively are Graves and 2 Vanguard. You either play Graves or you play 2 Vanguard. So you play like 2 Blasters and some tanky frontline dude, or 2 Vanguard. So Graves on his own was generally considered to be as good in the defensive line as 2 Vanguard, which is a pretty overtuned defensive line in the early game. In fact, Graves was so good, it was very common to carry him all the way through your build in Blaster Brawlers. He was 100% better than Lucien at the end game. Lucien was useful in the mid game to spread your red buff. Graves was better in the late game to provide the blind duration. So they are nerfing that fairly significantly, I'd say. The problem with 3 and 4 was pretty brutal in the early game. So toning that down, I think, is a very good change. Jarvan is weird. Jarvan is one of those champions that's pretty trashy in the early game, but is pretty commonly played in Shredder because this 100% speed buff was absurd on that build. So they're buffing the 1-star variant and nerfing the 3-star variant of his ult. Good change, in my opinion. Jarvan's still kind of trashy because he's Protector, and Protector is pretty trashy if you don't have 4 Protector Mystic. There's really no place in the game for Protector right now. So you basically are only playing him for either the speed boost or Dark Star. The Shredder herself. So I'm going to talk about this one a little bit. They could have nerfed her damage again. They could have nerfed her attack speed. Instead, they split the difference and nerfed the mana cost required. This was probably the best option to really nerfing her, because if they nerfed her damage anymore, I don't think she would be an early game carry, which she's supposed to be, and which early game physical damage kind of needs. So this was, of all the options they could have gone with, I think this is probably the most appropriate one. Maybe the only other one they could have gone with was lowering the attack speed on the ult itself. But I would have I think this is better. This is probably a fairly inspired change in my opinion. 2-cost champions, Blitzcrank. Buffing Blitzcrank 1, nerfing flip that. We're nerfing Blitzcrank, period. For those who don't really realize it, Blitzcrank is very good. Blitzcrank is very good to the point that you should be playing multiple Blitzcranks if you have empty slots. Because between the stun duration and the damage, Blitzcrank is very good. So, Blitzcrank's getting a damage nerf. I am all for this. 1-star Blitzcrank is just kind of a menace to any build that you just plug him into. Lucien, 3-star Lucien damage buff. If you're playing 3-star Lucien, I don't know what build you're playing outside maybe Cyber. Yeah, most blaster builds don't carry Lucien into the late game. I usually don't carry him into the late game. I usually use him to carry misfortune items. And like I don't think this changes much, because if you have a 3, it's pretty odd to me that you would have a 3-star Lucien, but I mean, he'll take the buff. So I'm of two minds about this Master Yi buff. I have been told this buff is insane. It looks like a 5% attack speed boost to me. Or something along those lines. I don't know how much... See, Master Yi is actually a really good unit, but the investment to build onto him is very high. You have to put like very specific items, and you have to put a lot of them on him. I mean, he can carry. He was the carry in Bang Bros, in case people forget. But, like, now you're just playing Master Yi, and I don't know what else you're running. 4-cost changes. Cho'Gath. I believe this... Since patch notes haven't officially come out yet, this one could be reverted, from what I've heard, because this sounds like this is a very significant buff to Cho'Gath. One of the problems I often have with Cho'Gath, especially Cho'Gath 1, is when he's a brawler, and you put him in the front line, and he instantly dies before he ults. That's a problem. If you're a brawler, you should be in the front line, and you shouldn't be dying before you ult. So this change hopefully will fix that, but at the same time really makes Cho'Gath very powerful in the early game. It makes Cho'Gath really powerful, period, because he's going to get wailed on, he's going to wail on back, and he's going to ult pretty regularly now. Whereas before, sometimes he just didn't ult because he got wailed on and died. Kale. Kale is Kale. One of the best champions in the game right now. Upping the mana cost by 10, so one more additional ult attack, or if you put a mana item on her, which I don't know why you would, you have an additional mana item on her. Good change. Kale's just too good, in my opinion. She kind of needs a nerf. My issue with Kale is that she might actually be one of the... I will very rarely say this. Kale might actually be a little too flexible. There might be a little bit too much you can do with Kale. She fits in kind of any build. You just kind of chuck her in there and she does good. So I'm okay with this nerf. Don't really have much else to say. Item changes. Last Whisper is getting a nerf from the 90% armor reduction to 75% armor reduction. I would be 100% fine with this nerf if they also nerfed Vanguard 2. Vanguard 2 is oppressive. If you're doing physical damage and you do not have a Last Whisper, Vanguard 2 is oppressive as hell. Vanguard 2 basically forces you to make a Last Whisper. And while I understand and agree with this nerf to the armor reduction of Last Whisper, because it in turn makes Last Whisper very oppressive, the reason why you keep seeing Last Whisper made by everyone is so they can kill Vanguard 2. Especially in the early and mid game. I really, really wish that this change was accompanied with a Vanguard 2 nerf by just like 25 armor. Like, not even that much. But, we're just going to have to roll with it. Anyway, that, I believe, is all the actual changes in the game. Coming on 10.12, 11, 10.11. So the next patch will be 10.12. I will do another one of these videos in 2 weeks that will probably be very lengthy because I'm going to try to cover my thoughts on set 3 up to the midpoint, some of the stuff coming out at the midpoint, and the changes being made to at the midpoint. Yeah, we'll go with that. Anyway, sign off. Peace.